Hey everyone, when it comes to economics or the economy, markets never fail. Of course, you're not going to hear that kind of information from proponents of big government or central planning. Now, they always try to suggest or allude to the exact opposite in terms of their narrative. They always try to suggest, oh, there was a market failure somewhere. And it's those darn evil business owners or market participants who are the source of all the economic woes or declines. Well, I mean, to agree, they are somewhat correct. But the beautiful thing about the free market is there is such thing as creative destruction. I mean, when you're talking about markets, think about it, folks. Once again, I'm just going to reiterate this one more time in this video because I think it's really important for people to understand this. A market is just a representation of millions, or ultimately, when you're talking about it, like global markets, is billions of people. And all individuals within that giant number are people that have their own preferences, decisions, economic valuations, preferences, and know-how. Like I say, everyone in a market situation brings their own unique aspects to the table. Whereas when you're talking about big government or central planning, that's always done under a top-down authoritarian one-size-fits-all approach. Because as you know, every place you go, no matter what country you go into, there's always one federal government. There's not multiple competing federal governments. Just like if you go to a province in Canada, there's not multiple competing provincial parties running that province or any particular province. No, it's whoever wins power. So it's always a one-size-fits-all approach when you're talking about government initiatives or policies. And as with any scenario, just think about it critically. Any scenario where you're doing a one-size-fits-all approach, well, all it takes is an obstacle or barrier to that one approach. And then, yes, you have, by natural extension, destroyed that aspect of the economy or that segment or sector of the economy. Whereas under market fundamentals, free market fundamentals, I'll point out, it's, once again, now you have multiple areas of interest, competing ventures, minds, and ideas. So while there might be some failures in some aspects in some segment or some businesses within a sector of the economy, there's always someone else or another group who will come up with a better business idea to fill that gap or to fill that void, or to attempt a whole new initiative to satisfy the needs of the consumer or their customers. So once again, markets don't fail, big government policy and central planning does. And the absence of allowing that free market to function and flourish, which is what we currently live in Canada, well, it's all but impossible to get out from the economic malfeasance and situations we currently find ourselves in, especially those in the oil and gas sectors, in particular the western provinces in this country, who by sheer geography are basically landlocked in terms of getting their resources to the market, where they can be properly and fairly compensated. But like I say, even when there's an area where the economy is being destroyed or hampered in any way by big government or central planning, there are always entrepreneurs, innovators, and men of ideas that will try to find solutions to those particular problems. And in Canada, there are such people who have done so when you're talking about the oil industry or sector in this country. Big government proponents, in conjunction and combination with their ultra-environmentalist counterparts, these greenies who seem hell-bent on destroying the entire economy in this country, as much as they've been doing their best to try to deny Alberta and Saskatchewan any ability to get their resources to market by blocking pipelines both to the west and to the east, and of course their environmentalist counterparts now trying to block at every junction Keystone XL from coming to fruition so that we can ship that oil down to the US. Like I say, these environmentalists, these greenies, these carbon tax proponents, these big government hacks, they've been doing everything. In particular, since the federal Liberals come to power under Justin Trudeau, the Canadian energy industry has been on a massive downslide and decline ever since. And yeah, I know some people say, well, yeah, it happened even before that. Oh, what was the other intervention? The collapse of oil prices? Oh, you mean because OPEC stopped playing their little price fixing game just long enough to try to compete with that growing market or that share of the market down in the U.S.? That's all that happened, is these OPEC countries realized that the U.S. was starting to eat their lunch. So they turned the taps on in an attempt to try to keep or maintain their market share. So whether you're talking about domestic government policy and central planning here in Canada, or foreign intervention or manipulation of the energy sector or energy prices. Yes, nothing about that stuff is free market. I mean, come on. They call it OPEC cartel, right? They call it the cartel. It's a price fiction regime of big governments, Saudi Arabia and the rest of those countries who represent OPEC. These are people that are, like I say, they're not genuine free marketeers. These are people that are trying to micromanage, manipulate, and dictate the price of oil. So no market fundamentals there either. In a market fundamental, if a market was truly allowed to flourish on the global stage, oil prices and gas prices, when you go to fill up your tank of your car, it'd be a whole lot cheaper than it is right now. So whether it's foreign intervention or manipulation of the price of oil and gas, or domestic government policy, that too affects the price of that oil and natural gas or those extracted resources. Once again, those have nothing to do with market fundamentals or breakdowns or any inability for the market to correct the current economic situation facing these companies. The ideas are out there. The only thing that's preventing them from being implemented are those who represent a monopoly force or government, aka the politicians, aka the ruling class in this country. Yes, Canada, there is a way for Alberta and Saskatchewan to get their oil resources to the market. Headline of the Financial Post, Terence Corcoran, the West doesn't need Quebec to get its oil flowing east. There is another way. Oil could move year-round through a pipeline to tanker operation loaded from a facility on the west coast of Hudson Bay. This has been reported by Terence Corcoran, November 6, 2019. The future of Alberta's oil and gas resources have never looked grimmer. Anti-pipeline activists promoting the ideology of climate change have infiltrated federal and provincial governments, leaving Canada's fossil fuel-rich western provinces in seeming isolation. Some First Nations groups and environmentalists went to court Tuesday to shut down the Trans Mountain XL oil sands pipeline to Canada's west coast. In Quebec, Bloc Québécois federal leader Yves-François Blanchet and Premier François Legault promised to block any attempt to build new pipeline capacity through the province to Canada's east coast. There is an alternative for the West, for Alberta's oil, and maybe for the future of Confederation. To put it bluntly, the West doesn't need Quebec. To get oil to the east and other parts of the world where fossil fuel demand is set to grow, no matter how hard the United Nations tries to shut it down, veteran Canadian energy transport expert Michael H. Bell has a plan. In articles on this page as recently as last year, Bell outlined a proposal that would liberate Alberta and Saskatchewan from the constitutional clutches of Quebec and British Columbia. Canada could economically and safely ship oil from Alberta by pipeline to Hudson's Bay, where it would be picked up by tanker for transport over the top of Quebec and Newfoundland and delivered to the East Coast and ultimately to the rest of the world. So once again, even with all those top-down structures and initiatives brought to you by big government proponents, top-down authoritarians and collectivists who have tried desperately to seemingly, I don't know what it is with these people, but they seem to want to deny Canadians, or at least a substantial portion of Canadians, from doing what needs to be done to sustain all of our modern livelihoods that we've all become accustomed to. Having nice heated homes, gas in our cars, fresh food in our bellies, delivered and transported by a lot of big old trucks using a lot of diesel and oil-based commodities as a means to get that food to your table. That's the thing, like nobody takes this stuff into account anymore, I guess. Bell maintains that such an operation, as shown on the accompanying map, would be environmentally sound and cost-effective. Bell himself is a Canadian Arctic shipping pioneer. He is a former senior vice president of FedNav, a Canadian shipping consortium where he was in charge of FedNav's Arctic operations and was involved with Petro-Canada in the Arctic Pilot Project to determine the safety and economics of polar-class icebreaking vessels operating in the Arctic year-round. So as you can see, folks, based on this picture, this small map that's accompanying this article, is you don't have to worry about, like, if the BC Liberals are end dippers, those leftists, those hardcore environmentalists, if they try to block pipelines or getting the resources out to the West Coast to get to the markets, or as what we've seen in the past with Quebec, preventing Energy East pipeline from coming to fruition. Well, look right there. All you got to do is get that oil to the northeast corner up there to a port, put that on ships, and ship it out through the waterway out to the Atlantic Ocean. Beautiful. Like I say, that's a completely legit and legal way where you don't have to fight these people that are saying, oh, we don't want it on the trains and we don't want pipelines going through my backyard. All these environmentalists are saying, oh, NIMBY, right? NIMBY, not in my backyard. But yeah, all these people who seem to be so overly concerned with the environment because they're scared to death of pipelines as a means to transport that oil. Well, okay, well, hey, listen. Another gentleman, this particular gentleman, come up with an idea that says, okay, you've prevented us from doing anything in terms of pipelines or putting on extensions in terms of rail or getting it down south by the Keystone XL pipeline. Okay, so you've blocked us at all attempts to try to get our oil to the market. But hey, imagine that. We've come up with another idea to make sure that can take place. And wonder what happens subsequent to this. Are the environmentalists going to say, oh, well, no, you can't do that because you might spill it in the water? Like I say, these people seem to be hell-bent to prevent anyone from being able to extract and sell their natural resources in this country. So as you can see, market participants such as this Michael Bell has already come up with an idea to get Canada's oil, those resources, to the market without having to go through a myriad court battles or fighting these environmentalists that are blocking pipelines from the east to the west. This is another alternative option and method to get our oil to the markets. How this is going to play out, I don't know. But I will say, at the very least, there it is. There is another option to get those oil resources in Western Canada to markets. And like I said at the beginning of this video, the only thing that can truly stop it or prevent it are those who are using big government as a means to deny it. Markets are saying they want to use voluntary interactions and engagements and peaceful cooperation as a means to sustain their industry. But we always got to remember, government, which is a representation of monopoly of force or violence, ultimately has the say. Because, well, using violence or threats thereof or imposed economic hardships on people, yeah, that has a really serious effect on the choices people make. And whether this idea comes to fruition will be ultimately determined and decided based on how much force or how much of an escalation of threats of force big government will use to prevent the market from functioning properly. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.